All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our session. Also, welcome to the first of the virtual U sessions. We're so happy to be able to put on these sessions for you. The talent acquisition and development team has been putting in a lot of time and effort to create something that we think delivers a lot of really great information to the community. So I'm honored to be one of the first to actually get to present to everyone within this the virtual U course. So this session in particular was designed for individuals who have used Zoom before. Maybe you've attended some meetings, hosted a few yourself, but you thought maybe like in the back of the head, in the back of your head, you're thinking, am I doing this right? Or, is this the best way to use this feature? Or maybe even you were in the middle of a meeting and you couldn't get something working, or something tripped you up, right? So the session really shares some of my personal experiences with Zoom, but also what I've gathered from from others as well. We in the technical learning group, we're taking all these calls from different areas, and some really interesting use cases have come up. So this is about kind of sharing that information that we found out with the greater community. With that being said, I don't have all the answers. We have Mike on the line from UIT who's going to be helping out. But even we could have we could have all these people, but still at the end of the day, there's going to be specific corner cases that come up that no one has experienced yet, right? So we're going to do our best to address anything we can. And for those things that maybe are a little bit out of the scope of the course today, or of the areas that we've discovered, we can be sure to follow up with you at some point. Okay. So the title of today's event is Effective Zoom Sessions. Okay, and I really want to stress that sessions portion of it, because I don't want to say Zoom meeting or Zoom event, because these are different things. We could have a meeting that's like a traditional team meeting, or you could have a one-on-one session. You could have an event that's in multiple parts. Um, drop-in hours, advising, things like this. So I want to touch on all of those different session types. Okay, won't be able to cover every single type, but there are a few big ones that we've assisted with, and I think will be kind of nice to get into some details. Okay, so you can see on our screen right now, I had this posted ahead of time, a few different considerations. So if you are having any issues, please reach out in chat. We can try to get you up and running. Um, Now, for this session, what we're going to be doing is, if you would like to ask a question, just go to the participants area and click on the raise hand button. And when I get to a logical break in what I'm talking about, I'll check for the raise hand. We're going to kind of discourage using the chat. I think for now, chat we're only using to help you get up and running, but we really want people to raise their hand. I won't be checking the chat during my session here. And Cheryl's going to be kind of around. Mike's going to be in there, but please raise your hand and ask your question out loud. That's what we prefer. If you do have any issues with that, of course, you can still use the chat. Okay. Of course, as we've been saying in all our other settings, please make sure to change your display name. I can see here that I didn't change mine, so I should probably do that. And you can see if I stop my video, it has my image there, but not my name. So to do that, you can see there it's just a case of, I'll bring this over here, click on more, rename. So this is in the participants window. I'm just going to put in Adam D. Prosper there. Okay. So we have that set up. So if everyone can do that, we'll know who it is that we're actually communicating with. It helps out quite a bit. All right, so what are we doing today? We're going to go through all these steps over here. So we're going to start with actually planning your session. We have a number of questions that you can go through and ask yourself to determine what kind of session you're hosting and how you want to proceed with it. We're going to move on to, once you have an idea of what the session is, how do you actually schedule it, some of the important considerations there. You have your session all scheduled. What are the things you should be doing now? What should happen a few days prior to the session, the day before, a few hours before, and so on. And then we'll cover, well, now it's the day of the session. What should you be doing? What are some of the tips around there? some considerations for interacting with participants, and then we're going to get into troubleshooting common issues, okay? For the session, we do have some assumptions that were listed in the description there. Just very generally, you know, it's as long as you have a basic knowledge of Zoom, you know how to join meetings, how to host meetings. Even if you've only like maybe hosted one meeting, or if you haven't hosted a meeting, but you have like the general idea of it, that's fine. But how to use the typical Zoom features. So what we're going to be doing is I'm not really going to be doing like a step-by-step through each of the settings and tools. We have another course that we've developed specifically for that, Intro to Zoom. We have a YouTube playlist of which is a recording of yours truly in there, going over all those features. So I encourage you to watch that and refer to our written guide if any of these things maybe you're not too familiar with. Okay, so let's get started. Actually planning the session, this first start. So we really want to consider the planning before we actually even book a meeting, go into a meeting, and so on. Now, of course, if you're just doing like a one-on-one with your staff, or it's your typical team meeting, maybe you don't really need to do this. But keep this in mind if you're working with maybe you're planning a virtual event, or you're planning to broadcast out to 100 people, something like that. You want to spend a little bit of time to make sure that things go smoothly, right? So that's what this is all about. First thing that I think is important to consider is just what kind of session are you planning to host, okay? And I have a list over here of some of the big ones. So is the session the traditional meeting where everyone's going to be speaking? Maybe it's like your team meeting, which is 20 people. Or is it more of like a broadcast, like how this is right now, where I'm talking, there's a bunch of people hopefully listening to me right now. And, you know, there isn't so much of maybe an interaction back and forth. Maybe it's something like what President Linton did, which even then was a little different. That was a webinar, but you get the idea where it's one or two people, they're talking, everyone else is kind of just listening along, okay? Even in that big setting, you have to decide, well, do you still want some interaction? How are you gonna handle it? Are you gonna use the raise hand feature? Are you gonna allow for chat? Okay. Is it a virtual event? Is it something that's made up of multiple portions? Do you have, you know, different guest speakers and Q&A portions and handouts and all this, okay? So depending on the type of session that you want to plan, the result of that is there should be different settings that you should be considering, okay? So what we did was come up with this little handout here. So I'll just click on that. And so this is something that, you know, we'll post in the chat, and we can get to you there. But essentially what I put together here is just a breakdown of each of the different meetings, and then the specific meeting settings that you can consider using, and then the meeting features. So the settings are the things that you're setting up in advance prior to actually hosting the meeting, and then the meeting features are the features you would be using during the meeting itself. So, you know, maybe if we go down to something like this, a virtual event, this is an interesting one we could kind of discuss with our time today. So, you know, if you're doing a virtual event, maybe it's a job fair orientation session, or even like a thing like this, like a training session, right? Maybe you want to use a waiting room, okay? So you can see here it kind of lists out some of the considerations for using a waiting room. It gives a little bit of time for the presenters to actually prepare, talk back and forth with each other without having the audience there and, you know, seeing behind the curtain. And what's neat about the waiting room feature is it is possible to say, okay, we have 50 people in there, let's bring them all in. You don't have to bring them in one by one, okay? Some other relevant settings, you know, mute participants on entry. Anytime you're dealing with a large group, that's a great setting to use. Breakout rooms, if you haven't seen breakout rooms, we're gonna have a demo of this at the end of the session. But essentially you could split your attendees into smaller groups, and you got some flexibility there with how you communicate with people in the breakout room. So we'll get into that. Polls, you can set up polls. We'll have a demo of this as well, where you can actually poll the audience and provide them with either multiple choice, or they can select from multiple, either one answer or multiple answers from there. You know, if you're doing a virtual event, it's probably a good idea that you set up an alternative host, someone who can be a co-host, maybe multiple people's, maybe if you have guest speakers. scheduling privileges. So this is a really neat feature that has come along more recently that we're going to get into. So maybe I'm an admin and I'm setting up the event, but I'm not actually going to be attending it. My colleagues are going to be hosting it, and they have different roles. So I could actually book this meeting on behalf of them, and it will appear in their Zoom. They're going to be able to edit it and so on, but I'll be the one kind of creating a bunch of meetings. So we're going to see how to do that, okay? So that's the relevant meeting sessions maybe for this virtual event. And then the meeting features. So do you want to use raise hand, right? Do you want people to be able to raise their hand? And this is great if you're going to permit audio questions and maybe not use the chat, right? Yes, no buttons. Do you want people to interact non-verbally and use these kind of things? The whiteboard is an excellent thing for our virtual events because the host or guest speakers can open up the whiteboard and draw something out. Maybe it's a schematic or something else, or brainstorming, right? Allow participants to unmute themselves. Well, if you're dealing with a large group, 300 people, maybe you want to assign someone the ability to unmute. So no one can unmute themselves. People have to raise their hand. And then from there, there's a co-host that they're dedicated to going and saying, okay, this person has a question, let's unmute them, we'll let them talk, okay? Disabling participant annotation. Do you want people drawing all over your screen while you're hosting a meeting, okay? So I'm not gonna get into the whole document here, but I just wanna show you that as we're going along and you're kind of thinking about, okay, I have this meeting coming up, what settings should I be paying attention to? This should help. And I mean, it's not an exhaustive list. It doesn't get into every single meeting type, but it's I tried to create it general enough that you know, you're going to be able to fit it in with what you're doing. And like with all of our docs, as we go along, as we find out more information and as Zoom develops, we're going to go in and update this as well. Okay, so I'll minimize out of that document there. We'll go back to our PowerPoint. So these are the four very broad categories that that we can talk about. Okay, so here's a big thing that we found out when designing our own sessions. The breakout rooms and polls features. So these are excellent features, really nice, really well designed. But there's a little bit of a snag that hopefully you haven't been burned by. So these features require the Zoom sessions host to be able to fully utilize them, and it's almost like the actual host, the true host. So what do I mean by that? Well, we have different types of hosts. When I'm creating a meeting, and I can actually bring my my meeting section over here. So I'm booking a meeting, and put this here. So I'm scheduling a meeting. When I'm booking this, if I'm not booking it for myself, maybe someone else, I'm booking this for Cheryl, and Cheryl's going to be running the meeting. So I add her as an alternative host. So the plan is I'm booking it, but Cheryl's going to go in, she's going to deliver that session. Now, what happens, what we found is that if I do that for Cheryl, she is an alternate host. I'm not actually in the meeting. So she can still use breakout rooms just fine, but she's not going to be able to create or edit polls in advance. I would have to create polls. And so when she's in the session, she can still launch the polls. She can use them, but as the true host, as the person who booked the meeting, only I have the ability to create those polls, okay? So that's the thing. You have to keep this in mind. If maybe you're planning, you know, I'm going to create this session and I'm going to have guest speakers, and I know the guest speakers, they're very familiar with Zoom. They're going to want to go in and create the polls in advance. They won't be able to if I'm the one booking the session. Okay, so something to keep in mind. They might have to send me their questions and I will send them up. That might be feasible if it's just a one-off, but if you're someone like in our department, Glenda, who's managing multiple people and multiple speakers, it's unrealistic to expect her to set up 50 different polls, you know, for the course of that month, right? So, you know, we'll get into some other ways that you can work around that. You know, generally speaking, if the person is comfortable enough to know how to create the polls and all that, maybe it's them who creates the Zoom session and then send it back to someone like Glenda, who then posts the link and handles like the other aspects of it, okay? So that's the alternate host. A co-host is someone who is assigned the co-host tag there. Same kind of ideas. They can't create the polls, they can launch them, but the other snag is they can't start breakout rooms. So the host themselves has to start a breakout room. So the workaround with this, if I bring my screen over here, okay, I can actually assign someone else. So if I go to my manage participants area here, I'll drag this over. I can go over the more area, and I can, in this case, I'm the only one in here doing a pre-recording, but you would see multiple people, and then I could reassign them as the host. So my co-host, I could just say, hey, I'm going to assign you as the host now. I could take it back at any time. But by doing that, they're going to be able to work with the breakout rooms. Okay. So my colleague Laura found a really nice link that breaks this all down. So I'll click on that full breakdown of host access, and it'll take us to our web browser here. So this compares what a host, a co-host, and alternative host can and can't do. And you can see it gives a really nice breakdown there. So that will be posted in the links there as well. Okay. Next topic, meeting templates. So this is really a very neat feature of our Zoom client. So someone, you went in, you created your meeting, you're really happy with how you set it up, and maybe this is like the first of multiple sessions you're going to be holding. There's going to be another 20 sessions like that. And you're thinking, oh geez, now I have to set up 20 meetings exactly the same, right? So what you can do instead, at the bottom of the page, you have this save as meeting template. So I can show this to you. I think it's always better to see the actual page. So I'm in my Zoom client over here. And remember, for all of this, you go to yorku.zoom.us and you sign in. So I have my my meeting, my dry run, are running effective Zoom sessions. And then just all the way at the bottom, I have save as a meeting template, and I could name it. And when I go to create a new meeting, you can see here that I could choose from my existing template. So if I choose one of these, it is going to pull in the title, the description. So of course, you're going to most likely want to go and change that to some extent. But then it's left up to you to change the time settings. And then also all of this is the same, right? Enable join before host. So this is the meat of it. You're going to get these settings. Alternative host, that doesn't carry over, so you do that. And then once you're done, what's awesome is that it keeps any registration that we're going to get into, and polls and so on. Okay, so that's what that looks like. Now we can move on to the next really neat feature, which is the ability to, well, let's start just with general scheduling, and then we're going to get into some of the neat things about it. So we know what kind of meeting we want to book. We started to actually plan it out. We're in the process of booking the meeting, and maybe we decide, at this point that, I don't want to run into those problems with the breakout rooms and the polls. I'm not actually the host. I want to be able to schedule this meeting, but I want to do it for someone else. Okay, so this is the scheduling privileges feature, and I can show you where this is as well. So as you're booking the meeting, you can even go back to a meeting you've already booked, which is awesome. And you have this schedule for, and you can see in this case, I can book meetings for Glenda, okay? And that's because she went in and she granted privileges. She said, hey, let Adam DeProspero book meetings for me, okay? So there's two parts to this, okay? In order for me to be able to book for Glenda and Glenda to be able to book for me and so on, Glenda would have to go into her settings page on the yorku.zoom.us. And all the way at the bottom here, there's this scheduling privileges. So look what it says. You can assign users into your account to schedule meetings on your behalf. You can also schedule meetings on behalf of someone that has assigned you the privilege. So Glenda would go in here, she would click on the plus, and she would say, Adam. Realistically, Glenda, in our area, Glenda's the one that's kind of coordinating everything, right? So I would go in and I would assign privileges for Glenda. So now Glenda has this, And I'll go back to my PowerPoint. So this is all the way at the bottom. This is a newer feature. Okay. So now when Glenda goes in, what she will do is say schedule for, and she'll use the drop down, and she'll see my name in there, and she can click on that, and it books a meeting for her, or sorry, for me rather. Okay, so it's a two-step process. The meeting host must enable the scheduling privilege on their end, so I'm going to enable it on my end, and I'm going to say grant Glenda the scheduling privilege, and then the scheduler must select that person when booking the meeting. So she would select me. This is what it looks like, and again, I'll use my actual client here. So in here, I can now see my meetings, okay? So these are just me, but I can also switch it to everyone, and now I see even the meetings that Glenda has hosted. So in this case, I'm able to schedule on Glenda's behalf, so she would, I would be able to see her meetings too. This might be great for someone like Glenda. This is excellent because she can, you know, for Laura and Marcella, she could go in and book meetings for them. She could also see their other meetings. So as great as this is, keep in mind, don't just start giving everyone access to booking meetings for you, because keep in mind, they will see your meetings there, right? Now, once Glenda has gone in there and maybe booked a meeting for me, I'll get an email. So it says, hi, you know, my email address, Glenda has scheduled a meeting for you. These are the details. Okay. Any questions about that? All right. Zoom security. This has been a big topic, and we're really happy to say that Zoom has been making really big strides over the course of this month. Actually, just within the course of April, there's been a lot of changes. So as of April 6th, all Zoom meetings now require a password. So this might sound like, oh, this is an extra step. It has to be password protected. You know, this is a usability barrier. It's going to be harder for my users. But I have to say that they did an excellent job implementing this. And I had a few meetings at first where, you know, I didn't even think I was using a password, but UIT flipped the switch. They turned on passwords by default. And it's pretty neat how it works. So when we're creating our meeting, okay, so I'm on the edit meeting screen. Again, I'll show you in my area here. So from here, I'm going to go to, this is my Zoom app, right? I'm going to go to meetings, and I see my meetings, and I start a new meeting here, schedule a meeting. And require meeting password is just turned on by default, okay? And it has a password in there, and I can change this if I want. I usually just leave it as is. But when what happens is, just give me 1 second here. So what happens is when you then book the meeting with that password, this is what it's really neat. The password is embedded into the Zoom link itself that you're sending out to the invite. So the link looks like this, and if I were to send anyone this link right now, they can click it, it opens, it never asks for the password. So you can see this is the new format. This would have been the old format over here, and you can see the difference. It has this additional attribute here where it's the password, and this is the encrypted password. So no one knows the actual password there, it's just this encrypted password. You might be thinking, well, I don't get it. If this link just works and it doesn't ask for a password, how is that secure? Well, the big issue that Zoom was having is this so-called Zoom bombing. And what that meant was people were taking this link over here, just yorq.zoom.us or whatever it was, zoom.us, and then guessing or having a bot guess a different combination of letters and numbers, which is the meeting ID. And if it wasn't password protected, they'd be able to access it. Well, now with this, it's, you know, not only do they have to guess a meeting ID, but then it has to be the proper combination of whatever the password is. So it's some astronomical, you know, odds of getting that. So it is quite secure. The password itself is encrypted. So as long as, of course, there's still a hole. If you grab this link and you give it to a malicious entity, of course, they're going to do something with it. But the whole idea is we're in kind of this closed network, right, where we're just sending this link out to people within our community. So we don't, it's not a big concern with what we're doing, right? Of course, at the end of the day, this is technology. There are holes, things break. So I'm not saying it's like, you know, airtight, perfect. But for our needs, I think it's pretty good what Zoom has come up with here. Okay. Registration. This is another really great feature built into our Zoom meetings now. And you, of course, it's disabled by default, but you could turn it on. So I want to stress too that all of these settings that we're working with, the majority of them, you access them through the Zoom client online, not your desktop client, but your web client. So when I'm booking a meeting, you can see here, so I'm going to go to meetings, schedule a new meeting, and you have this registration checkbox. If I check that, what happens is, I'll go back to my list of meetings here. You get this registration link, and when you click on it, it will take your users to the registration page. So now, instead of sharing out a meeting invite, what you would be doing if you want to use the registration page is share out this registration link, and you could post it on a public site or email it out, like what we did with our Sway. And you can, it's nice. You can provide a description of your session and then allow the users to fill it out. So this is all like just your standard stuff. And then we went in and added some information because we want to know the employee ID so we can give everyone their record there, right? So once you have your registration, if you want to work with it and edit it, you just go down to the very bottom of your meeting, registration, and you can either click on view and you can see all the people that have registered, or you can click on the edit button here. And this is where you get some of the details. So the approval. In our case, we want everyone to come to our session, so it's automatic approval. But maybe some of our other sessions, it's only for specific groups, right? You want to hold a confidential meeting. So you want someone to vet that, you can change it to manually approve. The host will get the email, and then you will be able to vet it and either accept or reject. And then you have a few other questions over here. You can choose from this nice list of the different default questions, or you can go up to the custom questions. So we added an employee ID and then that statement over there, right? And you set it up, you save it, and then you will see all of those in your section there, okay? So we covered this stuff. Okay, and then this is what it looks like as a user. So I have filled out the registration form, and I get this reply back in my email. So to join the meeting, and then it gives me my join. It allows me to add it to the calendar and so on. Okay. Okay, we looked at all that. This is a neat thing, meeting templates. So, oh, we already talked about this actually, so we could skip over this. But I guess just to reiterate, it's really nice, you know, especially if you've created your custom registration page, you've set up a poll, it's nice to be able to reuse that a few times, right? Great example, we have our Welcome to York sessions, which are held once a month, and that's the employee orientation. Now, the old style of this, what you could have done was just create a general Zoom link, set it as recurring, and then just constantly reuse that link, book new sessions with it. But the problem is, if you want to use a registration link, those are all going to be going, to my understanding anyways, unless someone can provide more information, but to my understanding, each time, even though you're just reusing that same meeting, even though you're doing it on different days, the registration is going to gather all of those people into a single registration. Maybe that's good. Maybe that's what you want to see, a total number of people who have ever registered for this one session. But for something like Welcome to York, maybe what you want to do is gather up for the particular sections and see, oh, we had 30 people in this one, we had 40 in the one prior to that, and so on. Okay, so that's one of the benefits of creating a meeting template and scheduling distinct sections there. All right. Okay, so now we've scheduled our meeting, we planned it all out. Some details on actually notifying our attendees. There's a few options when we want to notify the attendees to our session. For everyone's within New York and you're not using the registration feature, the best way would most likely be to just schedule it in Outlook, schedule your meeting in Outlook, and then everyone gets that invite. Even if people aren't in New York, sending out that invite as an Outlook, external people will still get it. I've tested it out. People with Gmail accounts, they could book it. Hotmail accounts, of course, work because that's a Microsoft product. Yahoo, the rest of them, in my experience, work pretty well. Even if they can't actually represent that as a calendar entry, at the very least, they get an email notification with the link in there. And of course, if you're using the registration feature, your participants will get an email notification, and they can, from there, as you saw, they can add it to their calendar. Okay, so now we have all this out of the way. It's kind of like we have a few days before our session. What should we be thinking about here? So a number of questions that I think are important to ask. Well, do you have any guest speakers? Okay, if you have guest speakers, make sure they're comfortable using Zoom. As easy as Zoom is for some of us, remember that everyone's at a different level of comfort with technology, and there's also such a variety of computer settings and different computer hardware that works in different ways. And I've been getting my family, like different people are using the free version of Zoom, which is also really nice. But in doing that, I'm connecting with a lot of people that, I would have expected that they would have had no problems. And it wasn't until I was kind of in their shoes and seeing like, oh, on your computer, you're getting this message. It's, you try to open the Zoom app and it's actually taking them to the Windows Store for some reason. So there are different computer setups. And that's why I think even if people are tech savvy, go through the steps. Actually, if it's an important meeting, try it out in advance and make sure things work, because you don't want to be there and one of your guest speakers isn't able to connect, and it's for some simple reason that you could have solved in advance. So it's kind of nice to be able to do this and test it out in advance. What we recommend is just do a dry run. You can use the exact same link you've already created for the meeting, and it will work ahead of the meeting. You don't have to wait until the meeting time that you scheduled for it to pop up. So decide on a date and time with your guest speaker and go through it and make sure it works. You can set up a separate meeting and do it that way if you don't feel comfortable using the actual meeting. But I like to say use the real meeting link, just because that's going to have a certain number of settings you set up. And maybe you thought you checked something off, but you didn't, and you'll catch it while you're testing it out. The other consideration with guest speakers is if they're scheduled to speak at a specific time that differs from the start time of the actual Zoom invite, have that discussion and let them know, like, hey, your invite says 1 p.m., but you're actually not going to go on until 1:30. So they're aware of that, and there's no confusion there. Also, again, I can't stress this enough. If your guest speakers want to use the polling feature, get them to send those questions to you in advance, or get them to add you as someone who can schedule for them. Okay. Co-host, same kind of idea. Log in, ensure your co-host feels comfortable with the tools and settings. I would suggest using the actual meeting for this, again, just because you never know what's in there that has been enabled or disabled. So I'll show you how to do that. From our meeting, I can just pick any one of these that is scheduled in the future. I can just go to it and I could start it. Right now it's grayed out because I'm already in a meeting. So of course you can't be in an existing meeting, but you can just start it. And from there, I would say even just like copy the invitation, shoot it off to them, and they should join. It's funny, I've done this a few times, and there might be meeting the event participants who they're kind of feeling the same way. They want to jump in advance and just make sure that they're able to access it. So there have been times where it was Cheryl, and Vanessa and I, and we're in the meeting making sure things are looking okay, and then this other person kind of pops up, and it's like kind of a funny moment, but there's no harm there as well, right? Depending on, of course, what you're doing. But keep that in mind. I guess that's a good warning that people could just kind of pop into that link. Okay. Okay. A few other notes here. Just get comfortable with how chat and the participants windows might render. So for example, I'll bring my window here. If I click on participants, manage participants, I clicked it. Where is it, right? Well, I have two screens, and it actually popped up on a different screen, so I have to go and drag it over. So be comfortable with that. That it might not pop up exactly where you see. From here, I could click on the three dots, and it could say merge to meeting window. So usually, I remember the first time I really started doing this, I was so comfortable seeing the participants here, and when it was popped out like this, I could pop it out, and it was somewhere else. It was off screen. Maybe it was even just over there. So focused on seeing this thing pop up over here, I was thinking, what's going on, right? So it's always good to play around with this stuff and get a sense of where it appears. Same thing with the chat. I can demo it on the chat as well. And it's the same idea. So I click on chat, and you can see now the chat appears and disappears from there. But this might be popped out as well, right? And now it appeared on a different screen, so I'd have to take it and drag it and move it around. So try it out, get comfortable with that. Move this stuff over here. If your co-host, if you guys are doing a big meeting and your co-host is going to be using that mute everyone button that you get on the participants window, keep in mind that that mutes the host as well. What we found works a little bit better is monitoring the participants pane, the panel there, and you could see who's unmuted, and maybe there's like some noise coming and they might not even realize that that cute kid in the background that's running around, it's being picked up on the mic too, right? So you can mute it for them and take care of that. Okay. Plan for interaction. So really discuss how participants will interact with you and with each other, and how you interact with your participants. So same kind of ideas we talked about earlier. Are you going to use chat or raise hand or a combination of both? If it's a large group and there's only one person, make it clear that maybe you can only answer a certain amount of questions. Maybe consider holding questions for a specific period of time, maybe at the end or at logical breaks like how we're doing now. And make sure the co-host knows how to mute and unmute participants. So those are kind of the big questions. How will the host and co-host interact? Having the host check in with the co-host periodically is a nice approach. Sometimes I forget to do that. I forget to say, hey, Cheryl, is everything okay in the chat? But those are some tips. Okay, setting up your environment. Just some like really quick notes on this. Make sure your lighting is good. So right now I have a lot of light coming at me from this side, and I have a little room light over here I could turn on. Get your lighting looking pretty decent. It's always nice. It's not huge. We're all in this situation together. So if you don't have the perfect setup, that's fine. But if you're not using a virtual background, if virtual background doesn't work, just be mindful of what your background looks like. And even for your family, I'm sure they don't want to accidentally appear in a meeting in front of 300 people. So, let them know that, you are. So that's what that looks like, just some general considerations there. All right, so now we have everything set up. We did all our planning. It's the big day. What do we want to keep in mind? Okay, so day of, what we tend to do is we'll log in early, 15 minutes before the start. We tend not to use the waiting room. Instead, we just put that slide on the screen that you saw. We can share those with you if you like that. And then while that slide's up there, you can actually pause it so people don't see what's going on. I'll show that in a second. But while we're setting up, I'll be getting my PowerPoint ready and my speaker notes, and I'll make sure that if I have a co-host that they have, we set up a document that contains all of the links that they'll be sharing in the slides, so we both have access to that. That's what that looks like. If you're logging in a little bit earlier, have a PowerPoint slide that contains some of the direction instructions for your participants. So you can share your screen and have those directions up there. If you want to pause the share, you can probably see over here I have pause. So I can actually click pause, And now you won't be able to see this, but I can start doing other things on my screen and you guys won't see that. So that's a nice feature. So that's just this right here, pause share. Okay, when you're actually gonna start the section, what we've been doing is just checking in with the co-host. Hey, Cheryl, are we ready to go? And she might say, hey, there's only 10 people in here. Let's give them a little bit more time, or give me 1 second. We got to get this set up. Some reminder, right? But instead of just jumping in and starting the session, you can touch base, and it works really nicely like that. Once you're ready to go, you guys, I imagine, are the experts in whatever area you're in, right? So you do the typical. What I like to do is introduce myself, introduce the topic, even though today I forgot to introduce myself. So hi, I'm Adam. And then go over any ground rules and things like that, right? So some of the simple ground rules you can see here: make sure to keep mics muted. If you speak, immediately mute yourself afterwards, these things. So I won't go over all of them, but you can kind of see them over there. And then the fine thing, just the final few areas I want to touch on is the participant interaction here, right? So, the raise hand, how do you actually get to that? So you can see that either at the bottom over here under manage participants, you can raise your hand from there, or the other way is in the gallery itself. Okay, so you have the 2 ways to do that. Okay, and then the polls, that note that we said earlier, be mindful that the user has to set it up. And then the breakout room. So let's try that right now. We could try, and let's, we could play around with the polls a little bit there too. Okay, so the final thing for us to touch on is troubleshooting some of the common issues. If you're finding that the co-host needs something, you're the one doing the speaking and the co-host is kind of managing stuff, what you can do is you can try out, if you click on your co-host, and you can actually make them the host and they get more features there, okay? So this will help if they're missing anything with breakout rooms, maybe they don't have access to polls as well. So you can try and assign them, and you can always take back that co-host permission. If you're having issues with screen share or chat, use the security button at the bottom of your Zoom bar, and you should be able to enable or disable those features over there. Okay, and then what you can do after that, I think the final thing is I want to show you some of the common issues I've had with PowerPoint. So if you're using multiple monitors, this might be something that drives you crazy. And I remember this was always an issue if I'm in a class and I need to do a presentation, but by default, it's going to default to this. So I'm going to go and say, hey, I want to do a presentation. I click the button, but it's not presenting. It's actually presenting on another one of my screens. So under slideshow, you can choose the monitor and you can set up or disable presenter view. So I've done this before. I go to do the presentation, and now all of a sudden you guys are seeing all my notes, and you can see I have everything written out word for word in here. So we don't want to reveal behind the curtain, right? So if you want, you can disable that, or you can set up which monitor. So I'm going to set mine to my second monitor, and then it's working properly over there. Okay. So we got to the end of our session, where I know we're running a little bit late on time. I apologize for that. But I'll stick around a little bit after the session. I want to thank you so much for attending today. I hope that everyone's safe out there, that you guys are doing well. And we have many other sessions coming up. I'm looking forward to seeing some of you in those other sessions. And we have a lot of great sessions for Virtual U to kind of get everyone up and running in this new environment that we're working in. So thank you so much. Take care. Enjoy.